We're not here to hurt you, but you have to stay here in the cabin with us. Families throughout history have been chosen to make this decision. Your family must choose to willingly sacrifice one of the three of you to prevent the apocalypse.
We're not sacrificing anyone.
For every no you give us, hundreds of thousands of people are going to die.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian Renteria, and usually this would be where I'd say we're talking about the big movie news items of the week, trailers, movies out in theaters this weekend. However, I am not doing that for this episode anyway, for this podcast anyway, because this podcast is all about reviews. That's right. I am reviewing my first movie of the year, my first review in quite some time, and that is for Knock at the Cabin. This is the new movie by M. Night Shyamalan, which he directed and also co-wrote. It's based off a novel by Paul Tremblay called The Cabin at the End of the World. So I just want to throw out I'm just going to get right into it. I'm just going to throw out a few tidbits before we get to the review. Knock at the Cabin is not a horror movie. This is a tension-filled thriller, which Shyamalan is pretty much known for. He's not really a horror director per se, like a James Wan or a Sam Raimi or anything like that. There's not even a jump scare in the movie. If you're wondering, I can't watch this because it's a horror movie and I can't stand or do horror movies, you don't have to worry about that. It's really more of a thriller. I don't know if you can handle that as well, but if you've seen any other Shyamalan movies, this is pretty much kind of what it is. It's that same point. This is more of a personal theater bit. You know, a lot of people talk about their theater experiences. I had one. I had someone in my screening, which was at 1:00, by the way. I took a Friday off and went to go to the movie 1:00 in the afternoon. There was an older man sitting in the front row, and he was sleeping when I walked into the auditorium with my brother and snoring. Not a lot, just a little bit. And I was like, okay, that's fine. You know, you do you. I watched this in Adobe Cinema at AMC. So I assume, and, if you ever been to Adobe Cinema at AMC, it's loud. And the seats shake a bit when they're doing their opening intro. I was like, for sure, this is going to wake this guy up. Nope. Trailers played. Nothing. Movie starts. Nothing. Like literally halfway through the movie, I see him get up and leave, and he comes back a few minutes later. No snoring after that, but I just thought it was interesting that this guy slept through the Dolby Cinema intro and all the trailers and the first half of the movie. So I guess it's a good nap. I mean, those seats are comfortable, but I probably would have gotten waken up by that intro alone. Okay, so let's get to the review. I didn't know how to approach this review, to be completely honest, because I haven't, it's not that the story is complicated or anything, because I just haven't done a review in quite some time, and I don't want to go point by point in terms of the story or anything like that. I did end up doing that a little bit when I was writing this out. So, bear with me on that. Obviously, I will figure out a way of how to, do better reviews in the future. So, just bear with me on that. Apologies for that. Yeah, again, I haven't done this in a while. I don't do them consistently enough to really have a process. So, any feedback will obviously be very, very good on that front. Before we go forward, I do want to stress this right away. This is a spoiler warning. I don't try to do spoilers too much anywhere else. But, if you listen to the podcast, I don't really spoil anything. Or to the movie, this is the podcast, but the movie roundup of news podcast, I don't really spoil anything. So, but I think here with this one, I think you kind of had to spoil it a little bit. So if you don't care about spoilers, if you've already seen the movie, obviously, you don't care, but let's just get right to it. So the story, the movie, pretty much. It's a family. Eric, played by Jonathan Groff, and Andrew, played by Ben Aldridge, and their adopted daughter, Wen, played by Kirsten Q. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. I think this is her first movie as well. Rent a cabin in the woods for a vacation. The movie opens with Wen outside catching grasshoppers, and suddenly Leonard, played by Dave Bautista, shows up and walks toward her. It immediately makes you a little bit uncomfortable. I think just because here's this little innocent girl catching grasshoppers, giving them names and talking to them and like writing down in her notebook and everything. And then this big muscle-bound man who is very well spoken, has a very tight medium shirt on. He comes talking to her, getting to know her, and he's very nice. And then it shifts. It's a very long scene, or not too long, but it's long enough where the tone shifts because Wen suddenly sees three other people come out of the woods. And Leonard says he's very sorry, but her family needs to make a choice. And rightly so, she gets up, bolts to the house, warns her dads, and they're like, oh, it's fine, whatever. And she's still freaking out at this point. And then the heaviest knocks you can expect echo in the cabin. Eric and Andrew don't immediately open the door, so good for them. They check the windows and they see that they're loaded with like these makeshift weapons. And Eric respectfully is like, you need to leave. And Leonard, still very calm, says, no, we can't do that. You need to let us in or we're going to come in. And of course, Leonard and his crew get into the house. Eric, again, Jonathan Groff's character, ends up getting a concussion, which is very important going forward. And Andrew ends up fighting and beating the crap out of Rupert Grint's character named Redmond until he notices he can't win. And we cut to Eric and Andrew tied up. Not win, because they're not savages. And then we get that shot from obviously the trailers, the very much promoted shot of them, of the two, of Eric and Andrew sitting down, tied up, and the four of them staring at them. And this is where the four introduce themselves. So Leonard, played again, Batista, we find out here that he's a second grade teacher. He kind of is the leader of the group because he's obviously, look at him, but he acts as the leader of the group. Redmond, played by Grint, he's very aggressive and, than the other three, and they immediately, you can tell that they haven't known each other for that long, but they know that Redmond is a hothead and they try to calm him down as much as possible. Sabrina, played by Kiki Amuku Bird, she's a nurse, which is how we find out that Eric has a concussion, and she kind of treats him a little bit throughout the movie. And then we have Adrienne, played by Abby Quinn, she reveals that she's a line chef. And she's kind of the quirky one of the group because she kind of has that quirky personality a little bit. She definitely does not fit into the other three, but they're all there. And then Leonard tells them why they're there. And Eric and Andrew have to make a choice. They need to choose which one of them is going to die, because if they don't, the world will end. And Leonard starts to tell them how. He goes very into specifics. He says that there is a giant wave of water. I forgot how he worded the second one, but we find out later that it's essentially a flu that kind of affects children. And then the third one will be that the skies will fall like shards of glass and God will scorch the land with his fingerprints. I remember that wording very specifically because they say the line twice in the movie, but I thought it's a great line. And then the world will go dark and everyone will die. And if you don't make a choice, Eric and Andrew will have to walk, you two will have to walk an apocalyptic wasteland with Wen by yourselves. And right away, Andrew, Aldrich's character, denies it. He tells them they're crazy, to let them go, but they don't. And to make it even more serious, Leonard says, for every no we get, a section of humanity will be judged. And immediately they put that forward. And Redmond gets on his knees, Rupert Grint's character, gets on his knees, he puts a hood over his head, which you see in the trailer, telling them to make a choice. And when they say no again, he says a section of humanity has been judged. And the other three kill Redmond right in front of them. They stab him in the head a lot, or they just stab him in the head once. And Sabrina and Adriana are all stunned. Leonard runs away and throws up in the kitchen, but they stand firm on what they have to do because they all have said, and they all have said that they all share the same vision and dream, which brought them to the cabin and brought them together. So they believe in what they do and what they're doing. And then they turn on the TV and like a little bit goes on and we hear like the news. We get an M. Night Shyamalan cameo because we always have to have an M. Night Shyamalan cameo. It's like an infomercial for something. And then it cuts to the news and they're talking about this earthquake that happened like 4 hours before the events in the movie. And Sabrina's like, it hasn't happened yet. And Leonard's like, no, like just keep watching. And like Eric and Andrew are like, you gotta let us go. And they're like, Leonard's like, just keep watching. And then eventually on the TV, they show that a tsunami is hitting and it hits like, I forgot what section of the country it hits, but it's this massive tsunami. And there's like obviously camera footage and it just hits everybody. Everybody dies. And I think when they're all watching TV at this point, this is when Wen makes a run for it. And it's interesting, the Wen character, because she plays such an important factor in like the first 15 minutes of the movie. And then she kind of becomes like this nothing character a little bit. Like she's always there, but she like kind of takes a backseat to Eric and Andrew and then the three that are left. But Leonard catches her and brings her back into the house. And then the day ends. This movie takes place in 2 days. Literally 2 days. And the next day, Adriana, we see that she's made breakfast for Wen. And she's like, when this is all over, you can come visit me at my restaurant and I'll make you anything you want. Again, seemingly friendly. And we go to the living room and Leonard is like, this is the day. We have to do this today. You have to make a choice. And Andrew is still not having any. And he's yelling at them somewhat convincingly, at least to us, the viewer. But no, because it's Adriana's turn. And this whole time, we don't really, they, the three that are left, don't really get too personal. They're like, we can't make this too personal. We can't get connected to you guys because one of you guys is going to die. Or we're going to die. And Adriana, at this point, trying to convince them, she's like, I have a son. And once again, the answer that Eric and Andrew give them is no. And during this, Wen has snuck a knife that she stole from breakfast and gives it to Eric in secret so he can cut himself free. And before they have to make the choice and before they're, confronted by the three, Andrew says that his ties are getting loose. So Adriana kneels down and puts the head over and puts the hood over her head, rather, and says that another section of humanity has been damned. And Leonard and Sabrina go ahead and kill her. They turn on TV. It's a news report that shows the virus, or a virus has broken out that's affecting parts of the world and is killing children of a certain age. But then we get we need some conflict, right? We need some more conflict besides this choice. Andrew remembers Redmond as someone who attacked him in a bar years ago, and that his name wasn't Redmond, it's O'Bannon. So this starts a possible reasoning for Andrew that this isn't some cult thing or a suicide pact, but a homophobic targeted attack. Which immediately the two that are left are like, no, we don't have a homophobic bone in our body. And we didn't know who was in this house. We didn't know that it was, two gay people. Our visions led us to this house. To whoever was in this house, that was who had to be judged. That's who had to make the choice. We didn't know it was you. We didn't know it was you two. And then Andrew says their plan is flawed because the tsunami was caused by an earthquake that happened 4 hours before they got there. And they've been checking their watches the whole time at the cabin. And he's watching the news report that's going on and the flu outbreak on the news. He says it's old. And we learn at this point that Andrew is a lawyer of some kind, and he's been dealing with these cases a little bit as well. And just completely telling Leonard off because Andrew has become the mouthpiece for him and Eric, because obviously Eric has a concussion and Eric's not really doing a lot of talking. He's kind of just sitting there. Eric has one scene with Sabrina in the bathroom, and Sabrina's at that point, Sabrina's the only one that kind of gets a little more personal with them at this point. And this is the only time she really gets personal. We get any sort of, character background on her. She says that she's not really religious, that she hated going to church as a kid. And, when, her mother died, she stopped going to church and all that stuff. But she believes in the visions that she saw. And Eric, during that scene, he sees something like in a mirror, in a light, but obviously he has a concussion. So we don't know if that plays a factor into it or not. So while this is happening, Eric tells Wen to do, we're back at, where Andrew's telling them off. So meanwhile, Eric tells Wen to do what she did on Thanksgiving. And she starts throwing a fake fit. And Leonard's trying to calm her down, and Eric finally gets free. And Leonard, and Sabrina are trying to, calm Eric down. While this is happening, Andrew somehow, in secret, because no one hears him, gets free and he goes out to the truck because he's got a gun. He's got a gun in the trunk of his car. And Sabrina follows him out and she starts reluctantly stabbing Andrew in the leg with her weapon. Because she's like, just calm down. You need to come back in the house. If you don't do it, I'm going to stab you. And she starts stabbing him while he's loading his gun. And when he finally gets it loaded, he fires off a shot. And you think, the way the camera is positioned, you think he hits her, but he doesn't. It's kind of like I don't know if he missed on purpose or if he was sending off a warning shot, but Sabrina runs. She runs away. She runs into the forest. And Andrew hobbles back into the house and he tells Leonard to stop and he traps him in the bathroom. And Eric and Andrew have this little spat. When they hear the window inside, like they're fighting about like, what are we going to do? Like Andrew's like, they cut the tires. We don't know what to do. Like they obviously have a truck they rolled in. Let's just take one and leave. And they hear the window break and they check the bathroom and there's this tiny window that is broken. And let's face it, if you don't watch the movie or if you've seen the movie, this is a tiny ass window. There is no way in hell that Batista, with his big ass body of all muscle, was fitting through this window, because he didn't. Andrew shoots at the bathtub because the curtain's drawn, and he pulls the curtain back, and that's when Leonard attacks. He did get him. He shot Leonard in the arm. Leonard, surprisingly, does not make a sound. And this is the only time that we really see Leonard get any sort of violent in the movie. And Sabrina comes running back into the house, and Andrew has escaped him at this point, and she shoots Sabrina. And Leonard is like, you still got to choose. And they're like, no, we don't. And the answer is still no. So Leonard grabs his weapon, and he says another section of humanity has been judged. And he hacks at Sabrina's body. The TV is turned on by Eric, and lo and behold, airplanes are falling from the sky. To which Eric directly quotes Leonard earlier saying the heavens will fall like shattered glass. And here is when Eric starts to believe it a little bit. And again, you don't know if he's actually starting to believe it because of the concussion or if he's starting to believe it because he's seeing the evidence in front of him. Well, Andrew is like, no, this is fake. They're obviously like, this is a channel they found and they're, putting it in and they're streaming it or whatever. So Leonard at this point has the gun. He gets the gun. So I forget. I think the order switched. I think they trap Leonard in the bathroom after they kill Sabrina. I can't remember what it was. That's how I wrote it in the outline, but I think the order is reversed. Anyway, doesn't matter. Leonard gets the gun. He has the gun, and he says, like, let's go outside because he wants to do this last bit outside. So they go out, and Leonard, in a final attempt to get them to reconsider, again, gets a knife. And Eric's like, go to the treehouse because the treehouse has a cabin. Or the cabin has a treehouse, rather. And Wen leaves, and Leonard's going to take himself out. And he says, after he does so, Eric and Andrew only have a few minutes after to decide. And Leonard slits his own throat. And a nasty thunderstorm suddenly just rolls in with lightning and thunder and everything. And like lightning strikes are coming down, and they're setting trees on fire and the ground on fire. It's happening. At least that's what we expect to believe. So Andrew and Eric go back in the house. I forget why they go back in the house, but they go back in the house. And Andrew's like, all right, let's leave. And Eric says no. Eric tells Andrew, you have to shoot so that Wen doesn't grow up in an apocalyptic wasteland. And Andrew is very reluctant. He's like, you have a concussion. You're not thinking straight. And Eric tells him, no, I am thinking straight. And he tells Andrew that he has seen something. He's seen a vision of him, Andrew, and a grown-up Wen together. And we, the audience, see it. We see what he's telling Andrew. Like, it's that, like, no wasteland, no storms. It's a grown-up Wen. They're happy. And Eric figures out that Leonard, Sabrina, Adrienne, and Redmond represented the four horsemen of the apocalypse in different ways. There was nurture for Adriana, care for Sabrina, and I forgot how he mentioned Leonard and Redmond. But he mentions, like, yeah, they're the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And me, in my mind, at this point, I'm like, is this, like, okay, they're the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Are Eric and Andrew maybe representatives of, like, good and evil? Or they're, like, is one of them Jesus? Is one of them the devil? And it's like, no, it's not that. I'm sure someone can make the argument that that is the case, but it's not. But Andrew and Eric hiring back and forth, and Andrew then reluctantly kills Eric. And the storm begins to dissipate. Andrew goes to get Wen in the treehouse, and she asks if they stopped everything. And it cuts to them outside the cabin, which somehow, in between Andrew getting Wen and them walking to the front of the cabin, has caught fire. I don't know how it caught fire, but it caught fire. And so does the tree next to it, and it falls on top of the cabin. And it's like, well, there's that. So Andrew and Wen walk down the road because the tires, like I mentioned, the tires of the truck have been slashed. And they eventually find a truck that belonged to Redmond. That Andrew was like, they obviously drove up in a truck. There's no way they walked here from anywhere. And they drive a little bit, and they get to a diner. And inside the diner, everybody's watching TV as the news is going on. And they're saying that everything that has happened so far has gone away. Like the flu deaths have gone down. The storms have dissipated. The planes have stopped falling from the sky. All of it has gone. It's died down. So Andrew and Wen go back to the car, and Andrew's looking in the back seat where there's like a bunch of backpacks and stuff, and it's everything from the group and evidence of saying who they were. Leonard has like a reward or a certificate of something with his students' names and like paint pictures written all over it. Sabrina's hospital ID is there. Adriana has a picture of her kid in her backpack, and Redmond has his work ID, which they mentioned what he did. I think he worked like for a gas company or something. So all that was real, what they were saying of who they were. But then Wen and Andrew are sitting in the truck, and Andrew turns on the radio, and Boogie Shoes starts playing, which in a flashback that we get earlier in the movie, we get some of those. Eric played the song on the way to the cabin. And Andrew turns it off right away. And Wen kind of looks at him, and then she goes and turns it on, and the song keeps playing, and then she turns it off, and then Andrew goes back and turns it on, and they drive off. They drive off on the road of, the sky, looking beautiful and everything, with everything they experienced, and that, God knows what's going to happen afterwards. That is the end of Knock at the Cabin. It's a very different ending from the book. A lot of people are talking about the ending from the book as well. I think this ending, I don't know. I think maybe more hopeful, because the book ending is kind of a downer, and the book ending is very different from the movie. And I don't think the ending from the book would have been, I think it would have been interesting to see, but I don't think it would have been a good movie ending, because it's such a downer, and it's more open-ended of what it is. This, despite how you feel about it, and I'll get to that in a little bit, kind of, gives you the answer a little bit. So let's talk about some pros. I enjoy the tension-filled scenes. Shyamalan, like him or not, can really wrench up the tension when he's on his A game. I'm not saying Knock at the Cabin is his A game, but some of the tension-filled scenes really work, and he's always been really good at that. The whole cast is great, but Dave Bautista needs to be the spotlight, because Dave Bautista, he has the look. He plays the direct opposite of what you expect from him, and he does it so well. And I know there was a post that was going around like last month or so of like which former wrestler turned actor is the better, movie star, is the biggest movie star, is the better actor. It's Bautista. It was like Bautista, The Rock, and John Cena. And it has to be Bautista. He is the better actor. He is the best actor of the three, because he has the range, and he has shown that. He could have easily gone, the Rock route or the John Cena route, especially very early on for John Cena. John Cena's kind of turned it around a little bit. He's found his niche in Hollywood, the action comedy bit, the goofball that can, turn really serious when it needs to be. But Bautista has the range. He is an actual actor. So if you want to have the conversation, it's Bautista. And it's a very quiet performance here. He could have played a rage-filled monster in this movie. He could have played the Redmond character, who was very angry. But no, he plays it very quiet. He's calm. He only lets his temper get the best of him once in the whole movie, and he apologizes right afterwards. He's even very calm when Wen is throwing a fit. So yeah, Bautista definitely gets the nod here. And for what it's worth, the suspense of whether or not the choice is real, it's played out rather well. It gives you enough to look at it from both perspectives, if you want to look at it from both perspectives, because the conviction that the four have is real. They never really waver. There's one bit where they waver, where Andrew brings up Redmond's real identity. They pivot back right away, and they're like, no, we saw the visions. We all have the same vision. Like, this is real. This needs to happen. You need to make a choice. No matter how difficult it is for us to follow, we need to follow through with this. We need to do this. You need to make a choice. Either that, or we all sacrifice ourselves and humanity is damned and the world happens. But when Andrew questions it, it's convincing. He brings up very, very good points and questions that we, the viewer, would probably end up asking if they weren't answered in the movie. And whether, like I mentioned, like I just mentioned a little bit earlier, whether you think everything is convincing or not, and how you take the ending, there's enough evidence on both sides. Is it real? Or were they really the representation of the four horsemen of the apocalypse? Is it just all a giant coincidence? Did Andrew and Eric really need to die? There's enough there. I feel like the ending kind of gives you that answer, whereas the book ending doesn't, because the book ending is very open-ended in terms of what was going on. But yeah, it gives you enough evidence to question everything, and especially at the very beginning. I feel like the ending kind of tips its hand a little bit, but well, let's see what you think. I only have one real gripe with the movie, and it's something that I've seen some other people point out online a little bit when I was looking at everybody's reactions to the movie. This movie is rated R, so it's odd that they cut away from the violence of the sacrifices. When Redmond dies, it cuts to his body and torso, and we see the blood drip down. When Adriana dies, it cuts away to the outside of the cabin, showing, the trees and nature and everything. The closest thing we see to a sacrifice is Sabrina's. We get a shot from outside the cabin looking in, and Leonard raises his weapon and hacks at Sabrina's body, but the camera pans away. And even when Leonard slices his own throat, he's like the main guy we've been following. You'd think we'd see his death. No, it once again only stays on the body and torso, and we see the blood drip down from his shirt. We see the aftermath of it, but we don't see him doing it. The movie is and the reason why I have a gripe with it is because the movie is essentially about a violent act. It becomes too scared to show that act of violence a little bit. Granted, the act of violence isn't directed toward let's call them the four horsemen. It's directed toward Eric and Andrew. One of them has to die. And violence hasn't necessarily always been Shyamalan's go-to. Like, he's obviously a very thriller aspect kind of guy. Yes, he has violence in his movies, but I think showing it, just maybe even one of them, at least one of them, even if it was just Leonard, showing it would have given the movie a bit more something. It probably would have given it a bit more, I don't want to say urgency, because, I mean, again, it takes place in 2 days. Just would have given it a little bit something, a little bit of if you will. And yes, the terror you don't see is the most frightening. That is a phrase that happens all the time. That's a phrase that's said and is probably very true. But I think it would have helped it. I'm not blood hungry or anything like that. I'm all for, the tight, thriller of Shyamalan. Like I mentioned, Shyamalan's not really, the big violence guy. But if you're gonna, this movie's about committing an act of violence, maybe you should at least show something of it. That's my only really gripe. And it's a very, very, very small, minute gripe that I'm not going to judge the entire movie for and say that it's a bad movie. So here's some miscellaneous stuff. I just have a few. There are, like I mentioned, some flashbacks in the movie. I mentioned, the flashback of them driving to the cabin with boogie shoes. Eric and Andrew getting Wen. We see that, going to a different country and getting Wen from there. The aftermath of Andrew coming out to his parents. We don't see him coming out. We see the aftermath of his parents coming out. And it's a shot of them, of Eric and Andrew, and then it's a shot of the parents, and they're just quiet. They don't say anything. We see the attack on Andrew, and then him immediately going to a boxing gym and getting the gun that he has. And right before that attack, we see him and Eric talking to each other, and they're saying things about each other. And Andrew tells Eric that he takes the mood out of certain situations. And Eric tells Andrew, which is something that we've learned at this point, because this flashback happens very late in the movie, that he has a temper. Not a scary one, but one that's right there, simmering at the surface, which can, again, we've seen already. And, Andrew's always very vocal. It's probably because he's a lawyer that he becomes kind of the mouthpiece of everything. And Eric, just kind of stands in the back. There were some people calling this movie boring. Or moving too slow. And to that I say, and I said this on the Twitter when I mentioned that I was going to be reviewing this movie, that we watch the same movie. Because there are maybe like 2 scenes that I can remember that probably slow the movie down a little bit. Just a tad. Nothing that brings it to a screeching halt. Nothing like other movies where they slow down and you can immediately tell that they're slowing down the movie for better or for worse. This movie does not have that. This movie is a very quick, solid thriller, never boring, at least for me. And the last miscellaneous thing that I want to bring up, and this is something that I'm trying to remember, or at the time I was trying to remember if Shyamalan did this, and he does. And I remember he has done this. He continues the close-up of his actors. He puts the camera right in the actor's face, which is not a problem. It's just something that when the movie started, because when the movie starts, the camera is like right up when Wen and Leonard are talking outside. The camera's right up in their faces. And it's something that I was like, why is it so close? And then I was trying to remember, like later on, is like, this is something that he does. This is Shyamalan's kind of, forte. This is what he does. He puts the camera right up in the actors' faces so we can see all their emotions. It just threw me off at the beginning because I guess, we haven't seen a Shyamalan movie in a while. And I'm just like, has he always done this? I just wanted to point it out. I don't know. It was weird for me because I was like, if you don't watch enough Shyamalan or haven't watched Shyamalan in a while, it's like when you see it, it's like, why is the camera so close to their faces? It's like, oh no, this is what he does. This is just his technique. So overall thoughts. I enjoyed Knock at the Cabin. I like the tension-filled thriller aspect. There's enough on both sides to make you question whether it's real or not. But like I mentioned before, the ending kind of tips its hand. Again, maybe it's just a massive coincidence. Who knows? The cast does a really great job of selling everything. Everybody in the cast is great from top to bottom. It's a very small cast. It's the 7 of them inside the cabin pretty much. Batista's great. Batista's awesome. He's kind of the highlight of the movie. I think Wen is probably the next highlight of the movie. I think I probably wanted more Wen. That would probably be my other gripe that I have. Very small. A little bit more Wen because she plays such an important factor in the beginning of the movie. And then as the rest of the movie plays out, she's just kind of there, not really doing anything. She doesn't really have any lines afterwards. She's just kind of there. So probably want a little bit more Wen. I'm getting there, adapting the novel. Maybe that's how it is in the novel too, but I don't know. I don't know where this falls under Shyamalan's resume. It's not at the bottom. It's not one of his bottom tier movies. I'd probably say it's mid-tier, at least for me. I don't know. I know everyone's tier list is different. It's not his best. It's definitely not his worst, but it's definitely right there in the mid-tier, probably upper mid-tier, probably for Shyamalan. Again, at least in my opinion. So, a rating. I know it's been a while since I've done a rating, and my rating system probably doesn't mean anything at this point because I haven't done it so long. But I'm bringing it back because I'm doing these reviews, obviously. So for any new first-time listeners or for any listener who has been listening to a while, it's like, you haven't done a review? What are you talking about? Here's the rating system that I came up with when I thought I was going to do more reviews. So stamp of approval is basically going to be my 5-star range, or my like 5 to 4.5 star range. That's kind of what I'm doing. Stamp of approval. Recommend, obviously, anything in the 4-star range. Rent or stream is anything in the 3-star range. Pass is anything in the 2 to 1-star range, and then run is basically just don't watch this movie. Why? Don't waste the time. You can find something else to do with an hour and a half or 2 hours, or in this case, almost 3 hours in your life. You can do anything else than watch this movie. I don't see myself watching a lot of movies that are run, but that's what it was. So Knock at the Cabin, for me, gets a recommended. I would definitely recommend Knock at the Cabin. If you're a fan of Shyamalan, obviously, I think you're probably going to watch this movie anyway, or have already watched it. But if you're, a fan of thrillers, or if you're on the fence about it, I would recommend Knock at the Cabin. I really would. I think it's a solid thriller. There are some things that probably could have been done a little bit better, but at the end of the day, it's not the worst movie you'll watch. It's definitely not the worst Shyamalan movie you'll watch either. So yeah, definitely recommend Knock at the Cabin. All right, that is the first review in quite some time. Again, I will get better once I keep doing this a little bit more, and yeah, any feedback would be nice. How you probably want review structures to be made. Do you want point by point? Do you just want my basic thoughts on it? You just want a pro-con list? Let me know, because I definitely want your opinions on this, because you have to listen to these episodes. I mean, I have to listen to these episodes like at least twice, but you have to listen to the episode too. So let me know what you think about that. Did you watch Knock at the Cabin? What did you think? Obviously, that's a more important thing. What did you think about Knock at the Cabin? Let me know on the social medias, or if you're on the YouTube page, you can just go ahead and click on the comment section. While we're doing that, you can go check out the links down below. Social medias are down there, both for the podcast and personal, where you can listen to the podcast: Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast. We are on Anchor. We are also on Good Pods. We are finally on Good Pods. So you guys can go check that out as well. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. I very much appreciate it. You guys are awesome. You guys are great. And I will see you guys next time. I'll see you guys later this week for the review, or not the review. I'm doing the review for the weekly roundup of news and anything else that may come in between, for the trailers and movies that are coming out this weekend. So yeah, thank you guys so much. Make sure to follow everything and go check out the links down below. And I will see you guys later this week. In the meantime, be sure to be good people, be safe, have a good rest of the week, and I will see you guys later. I don't know how to end these. I really don't know how to end these. I don't know what I honestly don't know what I'm going to leave in, so you can see my thought process as it happens. Yeah, I'm just going to say bye, guys. I'll see you later this week.
Will you make a choice?
You have to somehow trust us.
We're normal people just like you.
It doesn't matter. None of us believe you.
We will never choose anyone.